Hello, and this is Malorian from Wars here with our second episode of the Orc Tactical Team. And what we're going to be talking about this time is the relationship of chess to Warhammer Fantasy, and also that first level tactics I was talking about, which is the math or the priority tactics. So first of all, like I was saying last time, if you haven't had a strong chess background, you should really try and do that before going to Warhammer Fantasy, because there's a lot of things that really transfer over. For myself in school, I was part of the chess club. Kind of geeky, but whatever. And I think it really helped me, because some of the things you kind of pull out of there that some of the people that don't have this background coming into the game is just start general. Just having like a whole army, right? Just knowing that you're using your entire army to try and work it together for one battle plan, right? Because in chess, you have to be thinking about, I need to go and take out this piece, I need to get to that king, this is how I'm going to do it, right? Everything working together. That might sound obvious, but how many times have you seen people just kind of plonking down units in Warhammer Fantasy, and they might as well not even be on the same team? They're just running up to kill stuff, they're not really working together. And this is kind of thing where that background can kind of just help focus your mind and focus your strategies. The next part is just the idea of how in chess you have to defend your king. You have to be defensive at the same time as you're being offensive. And the way, like this can be more direct in Warhammer Fantasy, saying if you're playing Vampire Counts or Tomb Kings, where if you lose your Hierophant to your general, you're dead, you're done. So you have to make sure you're guarding them while pushing forward. For other armies, though, this is still important because, if they break your center, if they take out your general and break your leadership, if they take out your important units, like let's say your war machines or something, all of a sudden your whole battle line can fall apart and you can just lose in a second. So you have to have that understanding that while you are working and using all your units together to do one goal, you're having to be defensive at the same time and keeping that in mind there. The last thing I want to talk about is just really thinking ahead. So, in chess, you're always thinking that, okay, you're thinking a couple moves ahead, I'm going to move this here, the next turn I'll move this piece, and in the end, when we start knocking each other's pieces out, I'm going to turn out being ahead. And the way that this works in Warhammer Fantasy is you want to make sure that every time you make a move, you're thinking, all right, if I do this, what are the different options that my opponent has? And if he does any one of those, what am I going to do to counter it? And you might think that that's a general thing that everybody's, that's obvious, everybody's going to start doing that. But I think we all have seen the number of people that don't do that. One example I have is I was watching one person taking on a large combat army, and what his idea was is he was just going to try and attack one half of it while trying to stall the other half. A good idea. And so he went and up and engaged, and then he had some throwaway units that were just going to go and kind of hold back the other half of the army while he just concentrated over here. However, because he wasn't really thinking about his placement, his one throwaway unit actually redirected his opponent's unit into his flank, and all of a sudden his entire battle line just fell apart. Just a little bit more planning and thinking ahead of what could have happened would have changed that entire battle. So that's all I want to say about the chess to Warhammer. I'm not saying that you should be going out and playing, hundreds of games to become a master just to get a bit better at Warhammer, but you should look into it, especially if you're new into the hobby, new into Warhammer Fantasy. All right, so the first tactic I want to talk about, the first level, was the math or priority. And what this really is just based on information. It's knowing all the rules, all the stats, all the probabilities, and this is probably one of the ones that's the hardest to keep up on, and almost the most expensive as well. That's for sure, because what you're needing to do is, for every single army, you have to know every single stat and every single rule, and that's for your own army and for all your opponents. So what that means is buying all the army books, taking the time to read through them all, to memorize them, and that can take a lot of time and a lot of money to buy all those books, but it's critical, because I think we've all had those games where you're playing against a new army, or maybe an army you haven't played in a long time, so you forgot a rule, and because you didn't know that they had this ability or that this stat was whatever, all of a sudden something that you thought was going to happen didn't. You get smacked back and you just fall apart. So this can be something as simple as saying not knowing that that mixed unit of skinks and Kroxigor can move through water. So you're thinking they can't get through, all of a sudden they charge through a swamp, they hit your flank, and your entire battle line falls apart. Right? And it's all because you didn't know this one tiny little rule. You lost the game. So it's absolutely critical. And so basically what I'm saying is that whenever you're, especially if you're going to a tournament, one of the first things you should be doing, a couple of days before is just start going through all those army books from the other ones, skimming through, going, oh yeah, I forgot this guy has this strength, oh he has this rule, just trying to keep it all straight in your head so that you're not going to be caught off guard by anything. Another thing that's important is knowing the probabilities. So this is kind of where the math hammer comes in. I mean, because it's one thing to know the priorities, knowing that, say, knights are good to run down archers and stuff like that. But you also need to know the math behind it to know the probabilities. Because let's say, if I'm taking my Bretonnian knights and I'm going to be charging into a block of infantry, I know I'm going to win. But what's the chances that I'm going to be breaking them? Because it's not just all about if I win. If I don't break, that could mean that on their turn, they're countering me. And so you really got to know those numbers, because it could just be that, let's say you did know the numbers kind of ish and you thought that, oh yeah, I should be breaking them. But when you really went back and calculated it, you only had about a 40% chance of breaking them. And now all of a sudden this thing that you jumped into because you thought it was in your favor just lost you the game. So some of the things you can do for fun to try and practice these things is, I know in Warseer I run a little thread that's called the Arena of Death. People can just go and throw in, characters that they've made. We have a little fun tournament. And a big thing that comes out of that is just seeing, the different character builds and how they play off each other. And sometimes you'd be surprised that, you think that one combination is not all that great, but when they actually come together, you forget that, oh geez, oh yeah, those ogre tyrants have 5 wounds, man, yeah, they're they might not be able to have the same armor save, but it's hard to take those guys out, right? So you kind of need to go through and run the numbers before you're on the battlefield, and then now that ogre tyrant's killed your vampire lord and the entire game's over. At the same time, we all know there's people that are only about the math hammer in the game, right? They'll just go through, they'll just look at the numbers all day long, and they won't think about anything else, right? They'll say, oh, well, if you look at the numbers, this unit's better than this unit, so this one sucks. And, they won't look at, just the way that integrates with the army. I'll be talking about the physical tactics, the synergy tactics, and the psychological tactics later, and they'll ignore that. They just go and they focus just on the numbers. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's something you need to know, but you can't push it too far. So basically what I'm saying is just know your stuff. And then later on, when the next couple of episodes, and the next one actually, I'm going to be talking about that physical and that synergy tactics, and you'll see how just because you don't have the best units, you can still work them together to get a better result. So anyway, thanks for watching. Again, this has been Malorian and the Orc Tactical Team, and I'll see you again next week. Okay, thanks. Bye.